My name is Myra Weller, and I was 34 years old the day my mother called me for the first time in 9 years. I was in a supply room in Pueblo, Colorado, drawing up morphine for a man who had a day left, when my phone buzzed against the counter and my mother's voice came through like she had seen me at church on Sunday. No hello. No 9 years. Just this. Your father is being moved on Friday, and the facility needs your signature. She did not ask how I was. She did not mention my sister, or the wedding rehearsal she crossed me off of, or the 9 Decembers in between. She thought she was calling in a small favor from a daughter who owed her one. She had no idea what my father had already signed, 6 years before that phone call, in a legal aid office 6 blocks from the house I grew up in. Welcome back to Wise Family Revenge. This is where we tell the long, quiet stories about families, the kind where the damage takes years and the reckoning takes one morning. If you have ever been the child everybody assumed was fine, you are going to recognize this one. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. What I learned in that hospital changed what I was willing to put my name on, and it cost all three of us more than we planned to pay. I did not call her back. I finished my shift, sat in the parking lot with the engine off, and played the message 4 times. My mother has a school secretary's voice. 26 years at Fairbank Elementary taught her how to deliver news in a tone that leaves no room to answer back. Your father's being moved Friday. They need your signature. Call the number. It's easier than the office line. That was the whole thing. She said my father like he was a scheduling item, and she used my name at the start. The way you read one off a list to make sure you have the right family. I sat there and watched the lot lights come on. My husband Aaron was home with our daughter, Nell, who is 6, and who was, at that hour, almost certainly negotiating for one more chapter. On our refrigerator there is a calendar with everybody's week on it, color-coded, because I am the kind of person who needs to see the shape of things. I built that whole life out of nothing but shifts. Nursing school at night, 8 years of hospice after that, 4 of them on the schedule nobody else wanted. I have held the hands of 200 strangers while they died. I am very good at the part where you sit still and let something terrible happen slowly in front of you. What I have never been good at is the part where someone in my own family says my name and means me. I drove home. I did not tell Aaron until after Nell was down. And the whole time, one question kept circling, the way a splinter does when you can't see it. Nobody in Ohio had my cell number. So how did my mother get it? 9 years earlier, I was 25 and standing in the basement hall of St. Bridget's with a bundle of practice flowers, which are the fake ones you carry so you don't ruin the real ones. My mother had made the seating chart by hand. She always made things by hand. 4 tables, her small square handwriting, every name in its place, and the little diagram of the head table taped to the wall by the coffee urn like a fire drill map. My sister Delaney had come home from the hospital 8 days before. She was 22 that year, and she had been very sick, and I want to be clear that she had been very sick, because everything that happened next only works if you understand that my mother was not lying about the emergency. She just never once ran the numbers with me in them. At 4 o'clock my mother took the marker off the coffee urn and drew a line through my name at the head table. She said the rehearsal dinner had been changed to a welcome home supper. She said the room could not hold 2 occasions. She said it the way she read the lunch menu over the intercom, evenly, already moving to the next item. And when I asked her, out loud, in front of the florist and my fiancé and my aunt, why I was the one being taken off the chart, she looked at me with something close to patience and said the line I have carried for 9 years. Your sister needs the attention this month. I set the practice flowers down on a folding chair. I walked out the side door into the parking lot, and I got married 12 days later at the county courthouse with 6 people there, and one of them was the clerk. I did not call my mother again, and for a long time I told myself that was the end of it. People ask what you do with 9 years. Mostly you do Tuesdays. I finished the nursing degree I had already started before the wedding, and then I found hospice, which suits people like me, the ones who are calm in rooms where everyone else is loud. I sent Christmas cards the first 2 years. Both came back with a sticker on the front, return to sender, which is a thing a person has to physically ask the post office to arrange. so I stopped. Aaron asked me once, early on, if I wanted to try again, and I said I had already tried in the only currency that family accepted, which was showing up and being useful, and that I had gone bankrupt in it at 25. That is a joke I made at a kitchen table in Colorado, and I meant every word of it. Then Nell came, and the years went faster, and my mother's silence became a piece of furniture I stopped bumping into. Here is what actually made me get on a plane. It was not guilt. It was a phrase in that voicemail that my mother said the way you say a diagnosis you have not looked up. Aspiration pneumonia. In my job, that phrase has a shape. They mean the swallow is failing. They mean the body has started letting food into the lungs, and that this is the third or fourth act, not the first. My mother had used the phrase as scheduling detail. I heard it as a countdown. I booked a flight to Columbus for Wednesday morning before I had consciously decided to go, and when Aaron found the confirmation on the counter, he did not say anything smart. He just asked how many days. I said 5. I told him I would be back Sunday night, and I believed it, and I have never been more wrong about a number in my life. Fairbank, Ohio, in the second week of October, is a town that smells like wet leaves and diesel. I flew Denver to Columbus, picked up a rental, and drove 90 minutes northeast with the window cracked. The co-op where my father worked on tractors and combines for 31 years is still there. The video store is a vape shop. Half the porches have the same flags they had when I was in high school, and half have new ones. I did not drive down Bellamy Street. I want that on the record because everything in this story turns on where people are standing. I took a room at the Anchor Inn out on Route 9, an extended stay place with a hot plate and a parking lot full of contractor trucks, 6 minutes from Fairbank Memorial. Then I did the thing that any nurse would do first. I called the hospital, gave my father's name and date of birth, and asked for a clinical update. The unit clerk was polite and completely immovable. She could not confirm that a patient by that name was there. I told her I was his daughter. She asked if I was listed. I was not listed. There is a form, and my name was not on it, and the woman on the other end of that phone was doing her job exactly right. I sat on the end of a motel bed 1,300 miles from my own kitchen and understood that as far as the system was concerned, I was a stranger calling about a man named Ray Weller. That was Wednesday at 4 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, in a folder 2 floors above me, there was a different form with my name typed on it, and it had been sitting in his chart for 6 years. Visiting hours do not require a list, so at 6 that evening I walked in the front doors like anybody else and took the stairs to the second floor, East Wing, room 214. The door was open. There was a man in the bed by the window, and for about 3 seconds I thought they had given me the wrong number. My father was 6'1" and built like a fence post, and he had never in his life sat still. The man in that bed was maybe 140 pounds. His left hand was going, that slow, steady roll of the fingers you cannot stop and cannot hurry, and his face had the flatness Parkinson's gives people, where the expression stops reaching the surface even when the person underneath is fully home. 72 years old. Somebody had shaved him badly. There was a strip of missed whiskers along his jaw, and for some reason, that is the thing that got me. He turned his head. He looked at me for a long moment and he said, "Delaney." And then he stopped. His eyes went across my face again, slower, and something in them corrected, and he said, "Myra." He said it like a man setting down something heavy he had been carrying in the wrong hand. I have walked into rooms like that 4 days a week for 8 years. I know exactly what to do with my voice, where to put the chair, how to ask a question so the answer isn't work. I did all of it wrong. I stood in the doorway with my coat still on and my hands shaking, and I said, "Hi, Dad," like I had just come in from the driveway. He asked if it was cold out. I said not yet. We talked about nothing for 11 minutes, and then his eyes went loose and slid off me, and the man went back under, and I was still standing there when I heard my mother's shoes in the hall. She came in carrying 2 coffees from the machine downstairs and a clipboard with a rubber band around it. 68. Good wool coat. Gray hair cut short and square. She looked at me for a second and a half, and then she held out one of the coffees and said, "You came." Not, "I'm glad you came." Not, "It's been a long time." Just the fact. Logged. She sat down in the vinyl chair by the window, snapped the rubber band off her clipboard, and started in on Friday. The bed opens Friday. The hospital wants him out Friday. The packet has to go back Friday. She said, they just need a family signature, it's a formality. They're very backed up. She had tabs on the packet. Little colored tabs. The kind she used to put on field trip permission slips. And I stood there in my coat and understood that my mother had not called me because she wanted her daughter. She had called me because a form had a blank on it. So I asked her 3 questions. In the flat voice I use with families at 2 in the morning. Which facility? What level of care? And what his code status is. She answered the first one fast, Oak Bend, they have the bed. She answered the second one halfway. Skilled nursing, they'll do the therapy. And on the third one she stopped. She looked at me the way you look at a word in a language you took 1 year of. Then she said, his what? My mother had been managing that man's life for 46 years. She had his pill sorter in her purse. And she had never once read the page in his chart that says what happens if his heart stops. Behind her, my father's monitor changed tone, and neither of us turned around. Thursday morning, I met Renata Voss, the discharge planner, in a conference room the size of a walk-in closet. She was kind in the specific rationed way of people who deliver bad math for a living. There were 2 options, and she laid them out like cards. Oak Bend Care Center, 18 minutes out by the highway, had a bed available Friday, and Medicaid pending would cover it. She also slid over the state inspection summary without comment, which is its own kind of comment. 2 citations in 18 months, insufficient staffing on nights, delay in response to call lights, then Ridgeline Commons, 12 minutes the other direction, 12 residents to a hall, a physical therapist who stays past 3. Ridgeline needed $9,200 upfront and $312 a day private pay until Medicaid processed, which she said could take 90 days and sometimes takes 150. I asked about my parents' assets. Renata looked at my mother. My mother looked at the tabs on her clipboard. There is $3,100 in checking and a second mortgage on Bellamy Street. And that is where the conversation about money ended because my mother stood up and said she needed air. So I said the thing out loud, to Renata, in the small room. Get him somewhere decent, sign whatever needs signing, and be on a plane Sunday night. That was my whole plan. 5 days. I had already told my manager I would be back on the floor Monday. Renata wrote something on her legal pad, and then she said the sentence that turned the week, and she said it as pure logistics. No weight on it at all. Well, whoever signs the financial section has to be the agent on file, not the spouse, the agent. If you have ever stood at a discharge desk doing math you cannot win, you already know this part of the story. Let me ask you something in the comments. Has your family ever asked you for a signature before they asked how you were doing? I read every single one of these. And if this is your kind of quiet, hit subscribe so the next one finds you. My sister was in the second floor hallway when I came out, holding a kid's backpack shaped like a shark. Delaney is 31 now. She has 3 children, 9 and 6 and 3, and a husband who left 4 years ago, and she works part-time behind the counter at the pharmacy on 3rd. She looked at me the way you look at weather coming. Then she said, I found your nursing license online. It has your city on it. Mom made me look. That answered a question I had been carrying since the parking lot in Pueblo, and it answered it in the worst possible way, because my mother had known for years that finding me would take one search and a free afternoon. She had simply never needed anything until now. Delaney and I stood there, 2 women who used to share a bathroom, talking like co-workers who had never worked the same shift. She asked about Nell. I showed her a picture. She showed me 3. And in the pause after that, I heard the sentence in my own head that I had been refusing to say for 9 years, the one that explained the seating chart, the returned cards, all of it. I was fine. So they skip me. It is such a small piece of arithmetic. You do not get taken off the list because you failed. You get taken off because you are the line item that does not generate a phone call. I did not say it out loud. I said something about the coffee. And Delaney shifted the shark backpack to her other shoulder, looked down the hall at the closed door of 214, and said, "You should know something before you sign anything. You don't know the half of what he did." She would not say more in a hospital corridor, so Thursday afternoon I drove from the Anchor Inn out to Bellamy Street for the insurance folder, and I parked at the curb for a full minute before I could make myself walk up. The porch boards were soft on the left side. Inside, the house smelled like my whole childhood and, like something newer, powdered drink mix and diapers. My old room had 3 beds in it. Bunk against the far wall, a toddler mattress under the window, a plastic bin of stuffed animals where my desk used to be. Delaney's kids stay there 4 nights a week. I had spent 9 years imagining that house as a photograph, everything exactly where I left it. My mother frozen mid-sentence at the coffee urn. It had not waited for me for one single day. On the kitchen table, under a stack of church bulletins, was the folder my mother had told me about. And under that was paperwork she had not mentioned. A home equity line, opened 6 years ago. $41,000 drawn against a house that had been paid off since I was in middle school. I stood in that kitchen and did the sums the way I do them at work. Out loud, quietly, so I don't lose my place. 6 years of withdrawals. Nothing extravagant. 2,000 here, 3,800 there. One for 11,000 in a single month. It was not a vacation. It was not a boat. It was the shape of a family bailing water. And every single one of those withdrawals had happened while I was in Colorado, believing that the reason nobody called me was that nothing was happening. Delaney came by at 5 to pick up a car seat and found me at the table with the papers spread out. She did not get defensive. That is the thing I was not ready for. She sat down across from me, still in her pharmacy polo, and she told me the 9 years from her side, plainly, like she was reading off a label. 2 hospitalizations, at 22, and again at 24. Bipolar 2, diagnosed late, treated badly at first and then well. She was in a partial program for 11 weeks the winter I got married. Her husband made it as far as the 3rd pregnancy, and then went to Kentucky. The $11,000 month was a psychiatric facility in Columbus that took her when nobody else had a bed. The 2,000s were rent, and daycare, and the transmission. She said, "I know what it looks like on paper." And then she said, the thing that took my anger out from under me like a rug. Mom wasn't picking a favorite. She was picking which one of us was going to die first, and she was right about that part. I sat there with the home equity statements in my hand, and I could not find a single place to set my anger down. Because both things were true at once. My sister had genuinely been drowning, and I had genuinely been erased. My mother had run a triage system in a house with 2 daughters, and triage is not cruelty. Triage is a decision made in a hurry by someone who thinks there is only one blanket. What nobody in that family ever said out loud is what happens to the person you decide does not need the blanket. You stop checking, and after enough years, you stop being able to see her at all. My mother came home at 6 with a rotisserie chicken and found the 2 of us sitting in her kitchen with her home equity statements on the table. She did not react to the papers. She put the chicken down, took her coat off, hung it up, and then she took my elbow and walked me into the front room, which is a thing she has done to me since I was 9. She kept her voice under the sound of the television. "Don't talk about money in front of your sister. She can't handle this right now." And there it was. Same sentence, different month, 9 years and 1 dying man later. She was not being a hypocrite. She genuinely believed she was protecting a person from a conversation, and she genuinely did not see that she was also assigning me a job, which was to absorb it instead. That is how the system works in a house like mine. There is a person the bad news gets kept from, and there is a person the bad news gets handed to, and the second person is told she is being trusted. I looked at the front room while she talked. The couch was new. The recliner was my father's, and it had a folded towel over the headrest, the way you do when someone's hair has gotten thin. There was a hospital tray table already sitting in the corner, still in the shrink wrap. Somebody had bought it and not opened it. I said, "When did you buy that?" And my mother said, "In April," and went back into the kitchen to deal with the chicken. Friday morning, the plan changed. The way plans do. Dr. Halverson caught us at 9 in the hallway outside 214, tablet under his arm, 3 days of no sleep on him. The swallow study from Wednesday had come back bad. Not borderline. Bad. This was the third aspiration pneumonia this year, and the last one had bought him 9 days on antibiotics and a lot of ground he did not get back. Halverson said the word they always say next: a feeding tube. A peg, placed through the abdominal wall, 20 minutes in interventional radiology, and then the transfer would push out a week, because a tube changes his care level, and he would need days to tolerate the feeds. My mother said yes before the man finished the sentence. She said, "Whatever keeps him here," and she said it with her whole chest, and I want to be fair to her. That is love. It is love in the only dialect she has ever spoken, which is do everything, forever, and never ask the person. So I asked the question that made the hallway go quiet. Has anybody asked him? Halverson glanced at my mother. My mother said, "He can't decide anything anymore, Myra. He doesn't know what day it is." And I said, "When did you last ask him what day it was?" And she said, "This afternoon," like it settled the matter. It did not settle the matter. It was 2 in the afternoon, and I had been a nurse long enough to know that 2 in the afternoon is not a neutral hour for a man on carbidopa-levodopa. I did not say that in the hallway. I said I wanted to think, and I went down to the cafeteria and looked at his medication administration record on my phone, and I found the line I was looking for. First dose of the day, 5:40 in the morning. I did not sleep. At 4 in the morning the Anchor Inn heater was clanking, and I was lying there fully dressed doing the arithmetic of a man's brain. So at 20 to 6 I gave up and drove over. Second floor was still on nights. Trish was charge, a woman about my age with a lanyard full of pins, and when I told her what I did for a living she stopped treating me like a visitor and started treating me like a colleague, which is the only professional courtesy that has ever mattered to me. She said she had just given the 5:40. She said, "Give it 20 minutes." I sat down in the vinyl chair by the window in 214, with my coat in my lap. The room was dark except for the pump light and the parking lot glow coming through the mustard-colored curtain. My father breathed. The cart went by in the hall, rattling. At 6:10 in the morning, my father opened his eyes, looked at the ceiling, and said, "They need to fix that vent. It's been ticking since Tuesday." I sat forward so fast I dropped my coat. He turned his head. His eyes were clear. Not bright, not young, but present. All the way present. The specific look of a man who is entirely at home behind his own face. He said, "You cut your hair." I said, 9 years ago. He said, "Well, I'm behind." And then my father, who had said maybe 400 words to me a year for my entire childhood, talked to me for 40 minutes. He asked what Nell was like. He asked if Aaron was good to me, and he asked it seriously, and he waited for the answer. He knew it was Saturday. He knew who the president was. He knew he was in Fairbank Memorial, and he knew why. And at one point he said, "This pneumonia thing is going to be how it goes, isn't it?" And he said it without any drama at all, the way he used to diagnose a transmission. At 6:52, mid-sentence, his eyes went soft and slid sideways, and the man went back under the water. And I sat in that chair with my heart going and one thought in my head: he is in there. Every morning, and there is nobody in this chair. You do not build a case on one morning. So I came back Sunday at 5:45 and did it again, and I did not tell anyone I was doing it. Same thing. 6:08. His hand quieted. 6:11. He asked me whether I still took my coffee like a heathen. 38 minutes that time, and I timed it, because that is who I am. Before I left, I asked Trish a question at the nurse's station, and I asked it in the neutral voice, because I already suspected the answer and I did not want to lead her. "Has anyone else ever visited this patient at this hour?" Trish pulled up the visitor log out of habit, then just answered me from memory. "His wife comes at 2. Every day, 2 o'clock. Sometimes 2:30. Never missed one. Not once." And that was the whole thing right there, in a sentence from a night nurse who had no idea what she was handing me. My mother had not abandoned my father. My mother had visited that man every single day for 3 weeks. She had done it at 2 in the afternoon, after she dropped Delaney's kids at school, and after her hair appointment on Thursdays, which is a schedule built by a competent woman around the rest of a busy life. And at 2 in the afternoon, Ray Weller is a man who does not know what day it is. She had been visiting the wrong 40 minutes for 3 weeks. She had built her entire understanding of her husband's mind out of the hours when he was gone. And on that understanding she was about to authorize a hole in his stomach. Monday morning, I brought 2 coffees and sat in the chair before the cart came by, and at 6:10 he arrived like a train that is never late. We talked about the co-op. He wanted to know if I could still drive a stick. Then, in the middle of nothing, he stopped and looked at me with his eyebrows down and said, "Did you get the envelope?" I said, "What envelope?" He said, "I sent it to your work. The hospice? The one on the road with the name I can never say." And I sat there with a paper cup in each hand and told him I did not know what he was talking about, which was true, and which I have thought about every day since. He got frustrated then, the way people with Parkinson's get frustrated, quietly and inward, because the sentence he wanted was in a drawer he could not reach. He said, "I had a girl help me. Downtown. She had a stamp." He said, "Your mother doesn't." And then his mouth kept moving but the words came apart, and his hand started going, and at 6:49 the window shut with the door still open, and I did not get the rest. I went down to the cafeteria and sat in the corner with a cup of coffee I did not drink. A girl downtown with a stamp. That is a notary. My father had gone somewhere downtown, sat with a stranger, signed something in front of a notary, and mailed it to a hospice in Pueblo, Colorado, and then said the words, "Your mother doesn't." My hands were shaking again. Not because I did not know what was in that envelope, because some part of me had already started to remember. That night, I called home. Nell got the phone first and told me about a praying mantis on the screen door, in enormous detail, including its opinions. Then Aaron took over, and Aaron does not do small talk when there is a number on the table. He asked what Ridgeline wanted. I told him. 9,200 to start, and 312 a day after that. There was a pause on the line, and in the pause I could hear him standing in our kitchen, doing exactly what I had done at my mother's kitchen table. We had $21,400 saved. It had taken 6 years, and it was for a down payment on a house with a yard, because Nell wants a dog and we are renting from a man who does not allow one. Aaron said, "Is Oak Bend actually bad, or is it just not nice?" I told him about the call light citation. He said, "Okay." Then he said, "And your mother, is she putting in anything?" And I said no, and he let that sit. And then he said the thing that I have been turning over ever since. "Myra, you always take the shift nobody wants. You take it, you do it perfectly, and then you're honestly surprised when nobody sends a card." I did not argue with him. I stood in a motel parking lot on Route 9 with the trucks idling, and I did not say a word for about 10 seconds, which for me is a confession. He said, "I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying know which one you're doing." Then Nell yelled something about the mantis from the other room, and we both laughed and got off the phone. I went inside and lay on top of the covers with my shoes on. And at some point after midnight I decided I was going to pay the $9,200 myself, and I told myself it was because Oak Bend had a call light problem. Tuesday at 10, I drove out to Ridgeline Commons with my mother in the passenger seat, because she insisted on coming, and because a person who has managed everything for 46 years does not sit in a lobby. Ridgeline has a real front porch, and when I walked the halls on Monday afternoon, their physical therapist was still working with a resident at 3:10, which is the kind of thing I check. We sat down across from the admissions director, a woman named Pam Duffy with reading glasses on a chain and a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest grandma." I put my card on the desk for the deposit. My mother had the packet with the colored tabs in her lap, and she started explaining the family situation, which she does the way other people fold laundry, quickly and with the corners squared. Pam listened for a while. Then she pulled the transfer file the hospital had faxed over, went down the front page with one finger, and stopped. She looked up over the reading glasses, and she spoke to my mother, and she was not unkind, and she was not being dramatic. She was doing intake. She said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I think there's a mix-up. You're not the agent on this. Your daughter is." She said, "We'd need her on the financial section and the healthcare section both." And then she checked the date on the document, the way you do, and said it out loud without any idea what she was doing to that room. Since March of 6 years ago. My mother did not say anything. I have seen a lot of people take a lot of bad news, and I have never seen a face do what my mother's face did. Not shock. Recalculation. Like a woman going back through 6 years of her own life looking for the place where she stopped being told things. And after about 30 seconds she said, in a voice I had never heard out of her, "He never told me." Pam Duffy did the decent thing and gave us the conference room. Then she brought in the full packet the hospital had sent, and we went through it page by page with my mother sitting very straight in a chair with arms. There were 3 documents: an Ohio healthcare power of attorney, naming me as his agent, with the standard language about it taking effect when his physician determines he can no longer make his own decisions. A durable financial power of attorney, also me, also standing. And a living will declaration, which in Ohio is the narrow one, the one that only speaks up if 2 doctors agree a person is terminal or permanently unconscious. All 3 signed the same morning in March, 6 years ago, at the Legal Aid office on Prospect, downtown Fairbank. Pam said the pages had come over inside the records packet from his neurologist, and that half the time, nobody on the hospital side ever opens that tab, which is how a man's whole voice ends up filed behind a nerve conduction study. Notarized. 2 witnesses, and neither witness was a relative, because the law does not allow that, and because my father had apparently understood that. My mother read the signature page twice. Then she put it down and smoothed it flat with her palm, which is what she does instead of crying. She said, "He was still driving then." She said it like she was checking a fact against her own records. Then she said, "I filled out his Medicare forms that spring." I sat at that table and I did not feel one bit of what I expected to feel. There was no lift in my chest. I had spent 9 years being the person who was not on the list, and I had just found out I was on a list nobody had told either of us about, and the only thing I felt in that room was cold. Because a man in the early stage of Parkinson's had walked past his wife of 46 years and gone downtown to a free legal clinic, alone, to make sure that when the time came, the person who spoke for him would be the daughter who had not called in 3 years. I remembered in the parking lot, not gradually. All at once, standing between 2 parked cars with my keys in my hand. A manila envelope had come to the hospice on Beaumont Road 6 years ago, addressed to me care of the office, with a Fairbank postmark and my father's block printing on the front. I had picked it up off the mail table on a Thursday between visits. I had turned it over twice, and then I had put it in my bag and driven home and put it in the second drawer of the file cabinet in our spare room, underneath the warranty paperwork for the dryer, and I had never opened it. Not once in 6 years. I want to be honest about why, because it would be easy to say I forgot. I did not forget. Every time I opened that drawer for a tax form, I saw the corner of it. I did not open it because it was postmarked Fairbank, and because at that point I had 2 returned Christmas cards in a shoebox, and because I had built an entire adult life on the load-bearing belief that nobody in that house was ever going to reach for me. If I opened it and it was a form letter about a family plot, I would have to survive that. If I opened it and it was something else, I would have to survive that too. And I would have to survive knowing how long it had been sitting there. So I left it in the drawer with the dryer warranty. My father chose me 6 years ago, and I filed him. My mother did not go quiet. That is not who she is. By Wednesday morning, she had spoken to a lawyer out of the county seat, a man who does wills and real estate closings and who told her, correctly, that a power of attorney can be challenged on the question of capacity at signing. She repeated the phrase to me in the hospital hallway with the care of a woman using a word she had learned that morning. Capacity at signing. She said he had a tremor by then. She said he had already started forgetting the coffee filter. And then she said the part that actually had teeth, and she said it in front of Renata Voss, who was standing right there with a folder. My daughter has not spoken to this family in 9 years. She turns up when there's a bed to sign for and paperwork with money attached. I watched Renata's face do the thing professional faces do, which is nothing at all, which is the most dangerous thing a face can do. Renata is a good social worker. Renata had also been hearing my mother's version of this family, every afternoon at 2 o'clock, for 3 weeks. There was a version of me already living in that building, and it had gotten there first, and it had my mother's handwriting all over it. That afternoon, I sat in the cafeteria and understood that I had lost the one thing I came in with. Not the paperwork. The moral high ground. Because the sentence was true. I had not called. 9 years, and I had not called. And you can explain the reason to a stranger in about 4 minutes, but you cannot make a stranger feel it, and Renata Voss did not have 4 minutes. Here is where people usually tell me I should have gotten my own attorney. I had something better and slower, and I did not know it yet. Before I tell you what I did with it, do me one favor. If there is a woman in your life who is the one everybody calls and nobody ever checks on, send her this video. Then come back, because the next part is the part I would want her to hear. She found me in the parking garage that evening on the second level, between a pickup and a van with a wheelchair lift. I thought she had come to keep arguing. She had not. My mother stood there with her purse in both hands and told me about her brother. His name was Dale, he was 4 years older than her, and he started drinking at 15 and never really stopped. She said their mother spent 19 years pointed at Dale like a flashlight. Money, rides, bail once. She said she used to get straight report cards and set them on the kitchen table face up and go to bed. She said, "One time I broke my wrist at the roller rink and I waited until Sunday to say anything, because Dale had a bad week." She said her mother's exact words when she finally showed her the wrist were, "Oh, Charlotte, you're so good about things." And then my mother looked at me in a parking garage under a light that was buzzing, and she said, "I swore neither of my girls would drown, and I want to be careful here, because for about 5 seconds I loved her." Then she said the rest of it. She said, "But there is only ever enough for one of you." She did not say it as a confession. She said it as an operating principle, the way a woman explains a budget to somebody who has never had to keep one. She had been given a house with one blanket in it, and she had spent 40 years handing that blanket to whichever child was blue, and she had never once considered that the arrangement itself was the problem. She did not apologize. I stood there and waited for it, honestly, like an idiot, and it did not come. She said, "Are you going to sign the Oak Bend packet, or not?" And then she walked to her car. Delaney told me the rest on Thursday, in the pharmacy parking lot on her 15, sitting on the tailgate of my rental with 2 gas station coffees. She said, "You need to know about the trip. 6 years ago, in February, our father told our mother he was going to Indiana to look at a used brush hog. He did not go to Indiana. He drove 1,300 miles to Pueblo, Colorado by himself, 2 days each way, at 66 years old with a tremor he had not told anybody about yet. He found my street. Delaney knows the street name. He parked across from my house at about 4 in the afternoon, and he sat there. My car was in the driveway. He watched me carry groceries in. He watched the kitchen light go on. And he sat in that car for a little over 2 hours, and he never got out. Then he drove to a motel by the interstate, and the next morning he started home. Delaney said he told her about it exactly once, at a cookout, half in the bag on 2 beers, and made her swear. I asked her why he did not knock. She looked at the pavement for a while. Then she said, "He told me he didn't have anything to say for himself." That is the sentence. That is my whole father in one sentence. He drove 2,600 miles round trip to look at his daughter through a windshield because he could not think of a single thing he had earned the right to say. 3 weeks after he got home, he walked into the legal aid office on Prospect and signed his life over to her. Thursday afternoon, Dr. Halverson offered me the clean exit, and he offered it in good faith, because from where he stood it was obviously the kindest thing available. He caught me by the nurse's station with the consent forms already printed. He said, "Look, you're the agent. His physician has documented that he can't reliably participate in complex medical decisions, so legally, this is yours. Sign the PEG consent. I'll get him on the schedule for tomorrow morning, and Ridgeline can take him Saturday with the tube in. He said, "You can be on your plane." I had the pen. I had it in my hand, and I had the form flat on the counter, and my signature takes less than a second to write, and everything I had flown out here to accomplish was sitting one motion away. Get him somewhere decent. Sign the thing. Go home to my kid. And I stood there and I could not make my hand move, and it took me a good 15 seconds to understand why. I was about to decide the last chapter of a man's life without asking him, because asking him was inconvenient, because asking him would take a Friday morning and a rescheduled flight, and a fight with my mother. I was going to do it efficiently. I was going to do it correctly. I was going to do it for his own good. I had the paper my mother never had, and I was about to use it exactly the way she would have. That is the moment. Not the parking garage, not the admissions desk. A ballpoint pen on a counter at a nurse's station in Ohio, and a woman finally seeing that she had inherited the family arithmetic and carried it 1,300 miles and built a whole career on top of it. I take the shift nobody wants. Then I decide what is best for people who are too tired to argue. And I had never once considered that a person does not have to be drowning to deserve being asked. I put the pen down. Halverson waited, because he is a decent man who has been rushed his whole career and knows what it costs. I said, "I'm not consenting to the tube today." I said, "I want a palliative care consult, and I want a capacity evaluation, and I want both of them done at 6:10 tomorrow morning." He looked at me like I had asked for it in Latin. I told him about the 5:40 dose and the window. I told him I had sat in that chair every morning since Saturday and timed it, and that his patient had told me what day it was, where he was, and what aspiration pneumonia was going to do to him, unprompted, in his own words. Halverson scrolled back through the notes on his tablet. Then he said, "Huh?" Then he said, "The 2 o'clock exams are the ones in the chart." And I said, "I know." He booked it. 6:10, Friday, room 214, with the palliative nurse practitioner and Renata Voss and himself, and he put a hold on the PEG order pending the evaluation, and he wrote in the chart that the agent was requesting the patient be assessed for decisional capacity during his documented peak medication response. My mother took the news standing by the elevator with her coat over her arm. She said, "6 in the morning. Nobody meets at 6 in the morning, Myra. Nobody's even awake." And I said, "He is." She stood there with her hand on the elevator button, not pressing it. I knew exactly what I had just done. Once you ask a man that question in front of witnesses, you cannot unask it, and you do not get to choose the answer. I had just handed away the only real power I had ever been given in that family, and I had handed it to the one person nobody in it had consulted in 6 years. At 5:52 on Friday morning, there were 7 of us in room 214 and one bed. Halverson came in a fleece instead of the white coat and looked younger for it. Gwen Mabry, the palliative nurse practitioner, arrived with a travel mug and no clipboard at all, which told me everything I needed to know about her. Renata Voss brought the folder. Trish stood in the doorway on the last 20 minutes of her shift because she wanted to see it. And I did not blame her. My sister came in at 5:58 in a coat over pajama pants and stood against the wall by the bathroom door with her arms crossed. And my mother sat in the one chair with arms, in her good wool coat, with her purse on her knees like she was at a school board meeting she intended to speak at. Nobody said much. The room smelled like cafeteria coffee and hand sanitizer. Outside the window, the streetlights along Route 9 were still on, and the sky over the parking lot was that flat gray that is not quite morning. Trish had given the 5:40. Now we waited, which is a thing this family has never been good at. At 6:01, my mother said, "This is undignified." At 6:04, she said, "If he says something confused, I want it in the record that he was woken up." Gwen said, "Of course," in the tone of a woman who has been in 900 of these rooms. At 6:07, my father's left hand, which had been rolling steadily against the blanket since I walked in, went still. Delaney saw it and made a sound. At 6:09 he swallowed and turned his head toward the window, and my mother leaned forward in the chair with arms, and for the first time since he came in, she was in the room at the hour her husband was in it too. At 6:11 my father opened his eyes and said, "Well, that's a crowd." Gwen Mabry pulled a chair around so she was at his eye level and not standing over him, and she started the way you are supposed to start, with nothing in it. She asked him his name and where he was and what month it was, and he answered all three, and he added that the vent was still ticking. She asked him to tell her, in his own words, what the doctors had been talking about with him. He said, "I keep breathing my supper." He said, "Third time this year, and they clean it up with the drip antibiotics. And each time I come out the other side with less." Halverson was watching the monitor and also not watching it. Gwen asked him whether anybody had explained the feeding tube. He said, "Your mother has. Twice." And he looked over at Charlotte when he said it. Not unkindly. Then Gwen asked the open one. She asked, "Mr. Weller, what matters most to you about the time you have left?" And my father took his time. He said he did not want a tube. He said it plain, no speech in it. He said he had watched his own father go that way in '88, at a place out on the highway, with a bag on a pole and a roommate who hollered all night, and that he had thought about it every year since and had never once changed his mind. He said, "No Oak Bend." Then he said what he did want, and this is the part I was not ready for. He wanted the front room at the house on Bellamy Street, the one with the window that looks out on the street, so he could see who was going by. He said, "I'd like to be where I can hear the door." Gwen asked if he understood what choosing that would likely mean for how much time he had. He said, "It means less." Then he said, "I'm 72 and I can't swallow my own coffee, ma'am. I'm not confused about the arithmetic." Halverson wrote in the chart, out loud, so we could all hear him do it. Patient demonstrates decisional capacity during peak medication response. Patient declines gastrostomy tube and skilled nursing placement. Then he turned his head on the pillow and found me, and the room got very quiet, because everyone in it could tell that whatever came next was not for them. He said, "You have been in that chair every morning." I said, "6 of them." He said, "Figures." And then my father, who had not said a hard thing out loud in his life, said the truest one anybody in that family ever managed. "You were fine. So we skipped you." He said, "Your mother and me both." He said, "You never gave us a reason to be scared, and scared was the only thing that ever got us out of the chair, and that is not your fault and it sure as hell isn't your job to fix." Then he said, "I'm sorry." One line, no speech attached to it, and he did not ask me to say anything back, and he did not ask to be forgiven, and I have thought since that not asking was the whole apology. My eyes stayed dry, the way they always do when it counts. My body decides that, without me. I put my hand over his and his fingers were cool and the tremor came up under my palm like a motor idling. He held on for a second. Then he looked past me at my mother in her good coat with her purse on her knees, and he said, "Charlotte, you did the best you could with what you thought there was." And that is when my mother made a sound I had never heard her make in 34 years, one short breath in, like somebody had opened a door on a cold morning. At 6:46 his eyes went soft and slid sideways, and he was gone under again, and the sun finally came up over the parking lot. My mother caught me in the hallway by the water fountain before I made it to the stairs. She had her coat buttoned wrong. She said, "Wait." And then my mother, who had not asked me for one thing in 9 years, made me an offer. And she made it fast and low, the way you make an offer you have already argued yourself into. She said, "Mornings aren't reliable. You know that. You're the nurse." She said, "Tell Halverson he was groggy. Tell him you're not comfortable, that he was suggestible, that he'd say anything at that hour." She said, "You sign the consent this afternoon. He gets the tube. He gets months, maybe a year." And then she looked at me and put the rest of it on the table. She said, "And you come home. Thanksgiving. You and Aaron and the little girl. I'll set the table." I have thought about that hallway more than I have thought about anything else in my life, because she was not bribing me. She meant it. She was offering me the exact thing I had been standing outside of since I was 25, and she was offering it at full price, and the price was one sentence about my father being confused. I did not raise my voice. I have never raised my voice at my mother. Not once. And I was not going to start in a hallway with a water fountain running behind me. I said, "He asked to go home." I said, "I'm going to take him home." She said it again, louder, in case the problem was volume. She said, "He does not know what he's asking for." And I said, "This month he does." He said it out loud, in front of a doctor, and I'm not going to be the one who tells the room he didn't. Her hands started going. My mother's hands never go. She said, "So that's it, you'd rather be right." And I said, "No." I said, "I'd rather he got asked." Then I said the only boundary I have ever set with that woman, and I said it quietly, because I did not want it to sound like a threat, because it was not one. I said, "You can come to the house every day. You can have any hours you want. But from here on, in that room, you are going to ask instead of tell." I signed 4 things that day, and not one of them was the one I flew out there to sign. I signed the hospice election as his agent, with Gwen's team taking him at home. I signed the discharge to home instead of the transfer to Oak Bend. On the home care services agreement, I did what you do, because I have watched families get buried by this. I crossed out the responsible party line that made the signer personally guarantee the balance, wrote as agent, not individually, next to my name, and initialed it. And the intake coordinator looked at it for a second and then initialed it too, because that clause is not allowed to be a condition of anything, and everybody in that office knows it. And I signed the cancellation on Ridgeline Commons, which I had paid for 3 days earlier with the down payment on a house my daughter wanted a dog for. Pam Duffy refunded $7,200 and kept $2,000, which was in the contract I signed. In a paragraph I read, I called Aaron from the parking lot at 11 in the morning and told him the yard was going to have to wait a year and a half. He was quiet for a second, and then he said, "Is he home yet?" That is the man I married. Then I called my manager in Pueblo and asked for unpaid leave, and she gave me 23 days, and I lost the shift differential, and I lost the yard, and I lost my flight, and I lost the Thanksgiving my mother had put on the table in a hospital hallway. And driving the rental behind the medical transport van down Bellamy Street at 2 that afternoon, with my father's chart on the seat beside me, I understood that I had won, and that the winning was going to cost me the only thing I actually came for, which was more time with him. He lived 19 days. The hospital bed went in the front room by the window, and we moved the recliner against the wall, and my mother put the towel back over the headrest anyway. The tray table she bought in April came out of its shrink wrap on the second day. He could see the street. He could hear the door. On the second day, I taped a sheet of notebook paper to the refrigerator with a hand-drawn grid on it, days across the top, 3 names down the side, and I wrote in my own hours first so nobody could argue about who was asking who for what. 5 in the morning until noon. Me. Afternoons. Delaney. When the kids were at school. Evenings and nights. My mother. In her own house. In her own bed. With the monitor on the nightstand. My mother stood in front of that refrigerator for a long time the first night. She had run that entire house on an accounting nobody was ever allowed to see, and now it was on the door in pencil where the grandchildren could read it. She did not say anything about it, but she filled in her squares, and twice she asked Delaney to trade, and asking cost her something visible every single time. The 19 days were not beautiful. His pain got managed, and then it got harder to manage. He stopped eating on day 11, and we did the mouth swabs and the ice chips, and he did not once ask for the tube. Delaney's kids came on Sundays, and the 3-year-old thought the bed going up and down was the greatest machine ever built. On day 16, my mother slept in the recliner instead of upstairs, and nobody mentioned it in the morning. And on the 19th day, at 6:40 in the morning, in his window, with the street lights on Bellamy going off one at a time and my mother in the chair and my hand on his wrist, my father stopped breathing. He went in the 40 minutes of the day when he was most himself. I have decided to believe that was not an accident, and nobody in this world is qualified to argue with me about it. It is December now, and I am back in Pueblo. My mother did not become a different woman. She still calls Delaney first, every time, about everything, and I have made my peace with the fact that I will always be the second call in that phone. But she does call. We talk on the first Sunday of the month, and she asks before she tells me what I should do. And sometimes the asking is stiff and obvious, and I can hear her rehearsing it, and I count that as a mountain moved. The estate is small, and there is a Medicaid question still working its way through an office in Columbus. We will deal with it. Delaney texts me pictures of the kids on Sunday nights, and neither of us pretends we are close yet. And neither of us has stopped. And there is a piece of notebook paper on my refrigerator in Colorado now, with a grid on it, days across the top, and names down the side. And Nell's name is on it, and her jobs are ridiculous, because she is 6. Feed the fish. Pick the Friday movie. Wake up mom on Saturday. Nobody in my house has to fall apart to get looked at, and that is the whole inheritance I got from my father, handed to me in 40 minutes at 6 in the morning by a man who could barely swallow his own coffee. That is my story. A crossed-out seating chart, a folding chair, 40 minutes of daylight. If this made you think about your own parents, do one thing today. Ask them what they would want, while they can still tell you, and write down who they want speaking for them. Then check that your own paperwork says what you think it says. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.